I'm Steve, and I'm here with
Ron
and John.
Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie, a very special episode. Not only because it's episode 277 and we've made it that far, but
what? That's the most special number, Steve.
Yeah.
It's more special than that.
They took a poll
believe it.
and 277 won.
Yeah.
So it's a special because of that. But more importantly, because on Movie Schmovie today, we have a very special episode where we have two filmmakers on the podcast discussing their upcoming documentary that comes out next week called The Orange Years, the Nickelodeon story. We are fortunate enough through some relationship John has with either Scott Barber or Adam Sweeney to get them both on a Zoom call. And
Scott Barber is a close friend of the show, Patrick Anderson, and he's a guy who's, I believe, sent in questions, but he's definitely a listener, and also he's a guy that used to work at Apple as well. But I don't think you ever crossed paths with Patrick. But
hello, Patrick.
Patrick's one of those guys who it's like when you meet other friends of his, it's like that any friend of that person becomes a friend of yours instantly, you know? Like he's one of those guys. You just basically get together and talk about what a great guy Patrick is. So no, I kind of knew I would have an in when I saw that this guy's documentary that I knew I'd heard through the grapevine. He'd been working on it for years, and it just always sounded like such a shoe-in of a topic, doing a documentary about like the founding and the golden years of Nickelodeon. I was just thinking the way documentaries come out these days that have a certain nostalgic aspect to them. Like you can have something that's just like a glorified a press kit kind of thing, and people will still be fascinated with it.
Right.
So something that actually is like has some scope to it and has access. And when I heard the kind of people he was talking to, I was like, this sounds like a really valid attempt at this thing. And then, here it is. And we got a chance to see it early and talk to Adam and Scott.
Yeah. So so John, Steve, you're telling me we're three guys that like to cover movies. Since we can't do that on television, we're doing that some podcast form.
I don't know. Cue the slime.
What is it?
April Fool's Day.
Nick, Nickelodeon.
Well, welcome on the show, Scott and Adam. This is pretty exciting for us. The Orange Years. It is a documentary about Nickelodeon's beginnings into sort of becoming the channel that we now know it to be. But welcome on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us. That is a true statement. We did make a movie about early Nickelodeon.
There you go. See,
that is the
so John. We're already doing so well.
Got
the
the
fact
first one
checkers are
down.
loving this.
we are counter programming to any presidential debate that you'll ever watch.
Oh man!
By the way,
welcome.
We have one fact already. So
yeah.
There it is. We're winning.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Well, my first question for you is just whenever I see written and directed by with a documentary, I always wonder. I mean, I
What
think
does
I
that
kind of know
mean?
what that means because I've hacked together footage based on what I have and found the narrative in the footage, and that is a kind of writing that you can do.
But
what is that process like? Not just writing and directing a documentary, but collaborating on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and editing is writing. It really is. But yeah, with this film, we wrote it first. We kind of wrote our rough, what we thought the story was going to be, so we could know like what questions to ask. And then, the final writing process was definitely the editing process at the end. So, I know I always thought that was weird before we made it, like writing a documentary, or you're not telling the people what to say. There's no script, but that's what it was for us.
It's interesting because you do have to. It is a form of journalism. To a sense, right? And so we both have writing backgrounds as well in that realm. And so for me, what it means is we have to do a ton of research ahead of time, right? Because you have to find the story within the story, and then eventually you're going to break, and ultimately know what your story is. But you have definitely a rough outline. We compared it to kind of almost a tree, where the Nickelodeon, like the chronological timeline that involves Geraldine Laybourne and Vanessa Coffey and Anne Sweeney and David Vogler and so on and so forth, is that's the trunk, right? And then we move on to and have branches, which are whenever we highlight all of the iconic programs. So for me, that's kind of what like the writing element of it means. And so, Scott and I, it was interesting because we went back and forth on probably about like 3 different versions of what the story could have been, there, where it would have been almost like the Jinx or, Don't Fuck with Cats or something, to where it's like, okay, we're talking about our own experiences and like reliving our own childhoods and things like that. But ultimately we felt like the right story it was really to shine the light on these people that shaped generations of childhoods, because they deserve all of it, right? Like, and so, but to Scott's point, you do end up to a degree knowing, just like in journalism, whenever you see a reporter after a game who's trying to, kind of like write an angle, you do have a sense of what the important sound bites are that you need. Right. And so as you progress, you end up finding out, okay, we know that we are short on this specific area, right, or this specific topic. And so that was really interesting and kind of fascinating to watch, because by the time that we got towards the end, we had started to do like a rough cut, and Scott has done like a lion's share of the edit. So I want to give him credit for that. And but we had a good sense of what we needed and, and what we already had. And so it's really interesting to watch. So you do end up kind of writing and formulating the story. It's very different than a narrative feature. And this is so long-winded, and I apologize. But this is something that...
No, it's interesting.
Thank you. But it was fascinating for us to learn how to do this, because Scott's done more commercial videography and done more documentary filmmaking with respect to working with nonprofits and a lot of other, as a music videographer also. I've worked more as a screenwriter. So it's very interesting to work and kind of untap and kind of break what the story was.
Mm-hmm. Scott, and I have a question for both of you, actually. What is your emotional connection to this Scott and Adam? Because it's handled with a care that I just don't see in a lot of documentaries. So there's documentaries that just kind of handle subject matters.
Sure.
And then you see that this has a different connection. So Scott and Adam, tell me your emotional connection.
Yeah, man. First, thank you for saying that, because
thank you so
I really
much.
appreciate you noticing that. And, Nickelodeon was very close to our hearts. Both Adam and I came from single parent homes. We were both latchkey kids. So, and that was in the 80s. That's when you started to see a lot of that, both sure. Moms going to work or parents getting divorced. So there were a lot of people that were like us that felt like they were kind of raised by a TV, and we were certainly part of that, so Nickelodeon was very close to our heart. It also was a huge part of our friendship, because Adam and I, we were friends from 1991, so we were watching these shows together. Yeah, we've been friends since 5th grade. We went to Hauser Intermediate together and Oak Ridge Elementary. A fun fact: is it okay if I take? Let me ask my PR guy. Can I say this? Can I say? Can we get a one? They said I could say it. I had a mullet. And Adam, tell them what you had.
I had a rat tail.
Straight up, New Kids on the Block rat tail. It was glorious too. It was long.
Donnie Wahlberg.
Yeah, Donnie Wahlberg. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't like a rat tail like a Jedi one. It was like a legit like long rat tail. But yeah, I mean, it was really anyway. Yeah.
What Scott's trying to say is that
can we get a fact check on that? Do we have any photographic evidence?
Checking.
Yeah. What Scott's trying to say is that we were pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be clear, that's what we all got from that. By
that's
the way.
what you should take from that, is that we were very popular.
Documentaries are this weird kind of journalism versus entertainment. You are a journalist, but it's also entertainment, and you see a lot of documentaries like Tiger King that maybe the journalism was not so ethical all the time, like you can certainly frame things a certain way, and you have a moral duty to not do that, or at least some people do, but you also got to make this entertaining for people. And that was something that, we certainly had to look ourselves in the mirror and go, okay, we got to be truthful here. We're not trying to candy coat anything. Even though this is something that we're protective of. You know, it's kind of like sometimes people make documentaries about themselves, and I always hate that. You know, you need somebody else to make a documentary about you. And that's kind of how it was. You know, we had to really like talk about that and be like, this is something that that is special to us, and it's very close to our hearts. But we do have, you know, a duty to be truthful, you know, and make something that's. But it was difficult to kind of separate yourself from that. But you know you got to do it.
Yeah, and I think really quickly, one of the, you know, I think for me it's an important story, and probably for Scott too, I would assume, because one of the backstories of it that doesn't, you know, make it in there, because, you know, the focus needs to be on everyone in the Nickelodeon Nickelodeon network, is that one of the Nickelodeon actually kind of kept our friendship together, because whenever I was 11, I went and spent the night at Scott's house. We were part of this thing called Odyssey of the Mind, which was like this kind of like,
Oh my God.
yeah, it was like this creative program, right?
Yeah.
And it was really fun. And so I was like, this is awesome. We're going to spend the night. This is going to be so cool. So we were hanging out, playing with action figures, admiring the mullet and the rat tail, as we want to do.
Playing
And
Super
so-
Nintendo.
Playing Super Nintendo, and so, you know, it was an awesome night. And then the next day, you know, Scott's like, "Hey man, you want to stay the night again?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Let me call my mom." So I picked up the landline phone, as you did in 1991, and I called her, and I'm like, "Hey, can I stay the night?" "Okay, cool," and just hung up. And Scott's like, "What's up?" And he was like, "You don't look like what?" Is the answer no? Because I mean, we can always hang out another time. And I was like, so yeah, so the answer is no. And my parents are getting divorced, and I'm moving in an hour.
Man.
So,
wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Heavy.
yeah.
Twist.
And I remember it was on Pearl Harbor Day. So that was like kind of like an additional twist. But so I just remember that. And so long story short is that I ended up moving. And one of the ways that, you know, there wasn't social media back then, right? So it's like, if you moved, more often than not, like unless you had
just
like
lose,
a lot of
yeah.
May
money,
as well have been on the moon.
you were gone.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Totally.
30 minutes exactly was like being in Jupiter. And
was.
so, but one of the ways that we stayed friends is that we would watch Nickelodeon on the weekends or whenever, and we would call each other. And we would just
We
like be
watched
watching Snick, right? All the
Yeah.
time. And so we would watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? And, you know, gosh, what else played? Doug
Roundhouse.
played earlier.
Roundhouse.
Yeah, Ren and Stimpy.
Roundhouse.
I love
All that
Roundhouse.
was a little bit later. Ren and Stimpy, definitely. Pete and Pete played
Alex
sometimes.
Mack.
Alex Mack. And so it kept our friendship together, right? And so I think
That's cool.
when that happens, it's inevitable that you're going to have some sensitivity and appreciation and care that you take whenever you're dealing with the subject.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, like, you know, talking about, you know, the difference between, you know, the journalism and the entertainment and, you know, your personal history with Nickelodeon. Like, what is it that brought, you know, your friendship sounds like it's been consistent through those years, but it's like, what is it that brought you to the decision that the thing that you're going to do together is Nickelodeon, or is a doc about these specific years, you know, these years that were a big part of you guys maintaining your friendship? You know, I really admire this personal connection. So what was it, you know, if you know, Scott's doing video, you know, music stuff, or, you know, editing, and you're writing more, like, what is it that you were like, let's do it together on this? Like, what was it that paired you up with this Nick story?
You know, I think it was a little bit, and Scott can speak about this probably more, but it was it's interesting because, like, you know, they say past is prologue, right? And so Scott and I had worked on a couple of scripts beforehand, and we were ready to move on them, but they were narrative films, which are more expensive, obviously. We had talked to a couple of different, right, exactly. And so we talked to a couple of different directors. I had thrown around the idea of doing like a Snick weekend, because I was like, wouldn't it be fun if we had a big orange couch and we just every year we made a festival out of this, and we, you know, had people come and get slimed, and then we would bring different, you know, performers, right, every single time. So Scott had you know, really become very talented at filmmaking, and so we talked about the idea of like, isn't it like we could make something on our own, right, instead of waiting for other people to kind of like say, okay, now we're willing to do it. And so we talked about what is the most affordable form of filmmaking, which documentary filmmaking is. We we talked about like what is an idea for what audience like or what big thing has not been covered, right? Star Wars has been, there's probably 50 million documentaries.
Sure.
I've been in 2 of them, and so we talked about it, and we were like, well, what about Nickelodeon? Has anyone done that? And so we kind of joke around and we say like we did 5 minutes of fast Google research and found out that nobody had, and we were like, that's our subject.
That's the same thing you do when you want to start a podcast, Adam. Is like you look to see, wait, is there already a podcast with this name? No one else is doing Small Wonder episode by episode recaps. Okay,
why not?
We found our niche.
I remember it too. Adam, he has in addition to journalism, he has a strong background in marketing and things like that. And he was working for a company, and they needed some videos done. So me and him were kind of double teaming these videos where we were kind of like setting up lights, interviewing people, and editing it. And this is at the same time we're also writing scripts, and it's kind of like, man, I think we could do this. Like I remember that thought of it's like we're already making these like mini documentaries for these other companies. Like I think we could do this. I think we could interview some people and edit it. Like I think that's possible. We can totally do this. So yeah, and that was it. We all keep like track of like, oh, that'd make a cool doc. Oh, sometimes you have an idea, and then you do some research and you're like, there's not really a story there, or there's not enough people that are interested or whatever. And whenever we said Nickelodeon, we're like, oh yeah, how would that work though? How could you do a documentary about Nickelodeon? And then it was a cool idea, a cool sounding idea. And then really once we started doing the research, that kind of backed up our affirmation that this was a good idea, because it's not just a neat idea. There's actually a story. If there's no story there, then why the hell are you doing it? You can show people and show clips from the 80s and interview some people, and that's fun and good, but there's got to be a story there. And really once we started doing the research and we're like, oh man, there's actually this would make a cool doc, like nostalgia aside, even if this is something that people never heard about. And that's what we really wanted to do. Even people that weren't Nick fans, hopefully really enjoy this doc,
Did you have any particular access that was a starting point? Like, did you know you could talk to so-and-so, or were you really just starting cold with Nickelodeon and that's it?
Yeah. I would say we started
none.
cold. Honestly, we had absolutely none. And
Wow.
and to Scott's credit, one of the most important elements of being able to pull something like this off is to know what you can do and know what you can't. Right. And so one thing that we talked about a lot very early was like, let's not use our resources, especially our like monetary resources, until we absolutely have to do that. Right. And so with that guidance, and that suggestion, like I said, to Scott's credit, that got us very, very far. Right. And we ended up realizing and accomplishing a lot of things that we probably didn't know that we could accomplish. But, to go back to your question with respect to our database, we literally just sat down. I shouldn't say the word literally because I say we just sat down. But yeah,
you didn't figuratively sit down?
Yeah, we figuratively sat down.
We did both. Yeah.
As I was walking around.
Which Scott and I always joke around about, because there was one time on this episode, I don't remember if it was like Jenny Jones or Ricky Lake or something, but there was one person.
Remember those?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's one time where this person goes, I was in hell. Literally.
I had a teacher in high school who said, this is the art movement that literally shook Europe.
You're like, that sounds like actually it was probably plate tectonics.
Right.
Yeah.
But so go ahead.
They didn't get along with the science teacher.
Not at all. Yeah, the science teacher is just sitting there every time outside of the class, just with the middle finger up. But yeah, so we just created a spreadsheet, and we just went through every single cast list, and we basically did like what we called like, I guess it would be like the good, better, best, or like A, B, and C list, right? Where we were like, hey, these are the minimal amount of people that we have to have in order to make this documentary. This would be the good, which would be like, wow, that's incredible. And then we have to there's the great, which is, everybody that we could possibly get that we could think of. And we were super, super blessed because that's what we ended up with. And so, yeah, but it started with nothing. Like Scott and I were just looking, and we're just Facebooking and like DMing like Michael Ray Bauer and all of these people. And we're like, hey, So
It
here's the
is.
thing, like you can check out our trailer where we're imitating you guys, which is really interesting because it took a lot of trust.
There were quite a few moments when we just kind of dove in with both feet, you know, and maybe, I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. It worked, but there were a lot of moments where I can remember being like, is this gonna work? Like, because like you said, usually people that do a documentary, it's because you have an in, you know, you have access to it somehow. And we did not. Even when we did a or an Indiegogo, you can see it, it's still online. And even at the end of that, like I can remember like, cool, we got all this money. What if nobody wants to do this and we have to give all these people their money back? Like, what if we have to literally, like, there we go. What if I have to figuratively call all these people and say, hey, I'm sorry, like, we can't make the movie? Because we had the money and everything, and we were just like, I hope people say yes. And it was kind of like, what's the word? I don't know what analogy I would say, but it got progressively easier and easier and easier. In the beginning, it was people were like, I don't know about you guys. 2 guys from Texas. I've never made a film before. I'm going to pass. Maybe not. But then it was like, we got Mark Summers. And then once we got him, it's like, come on, man. Like Mark Summers is doing this. And then that moved it. And then once we got Kenan Thompson, it's like, come on, man. Kenan Thompson, he's a super busy guy. Yeah. He's a super, very, very famous guy. Just do it. And then everyone said yes. You know, and another thing, you know, we got our money from Indiegogo. So it's not like this is this big, huge thing. You know, a lot of people mistakenly think this is made by Nickelodeon or whatever, but it's not. It's made from, you know, it started with me and Adam, and then we got an amazing crew, producers and cinematographers together. It was a really brilliant team that made this, but it still was a small team with not very much money. So we would just go to LA and book everybody. I mean, we would interview from sun up to sundown. We would do like, I think the first time we went for like 4 days and we interviewed like 20 people. Like it was just like the very first trip we went out to LA and we did like the cast of Salute Your Shorts, Mark Summers, Phil Moore from Nick Arcade, Kirk Fogg from Legends of the Hidden Temple, the majority of the cast of All That, the writers from Hey Dude. I mean, it was just crazy. We got all these people, and then we would go to New York and we would do everybody that, you know, we would do the same thing where it's like boom, 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 boom. Wow. So, you know, that's one thing that like, it's not really like a super sexy thing to be proud of, but like our budgeting, I'm really proud of that because we made this movie on, you know, when you look at other movies, comparatively like pretty low budget, you know?
One thing that I did notice that I didn't know at all on any level is how many women were at the top. And you handled that with, again, care that I just hadn't seen in a lot of documentaries. How did you figure out how to tell the story in a way that didn't feel like it was like pushing that fact, but it still kind of presented it in a way that felt very empowering? How'd you figure out how to shape that narrative in a way that, I mean, it's a fact that these women were at the top.
It's a fact, yeah.
But you know what
It's a fun fact.
Yeah, it's a incredible fact.
You know, I think some of it realistically came because it was self-evident to a degree, right? It's
just there. It's
yeah. And you also had these, you know, amazing women and men that were also speaking so highly and kindly of each other, right? And so to Scott's point, it would have been one thing if we would have, I think, inserted ourselves in, you know, like a lot of documentaries do, and some of them are great at doing it, with our voices, right? And if we would have been like, you know, and at this point, like Geraldine Laybourne said, don't go there, girlfriend, right? Like everyone would have been like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Right? But because they all were telling the story truthfully, you know, so there was like some verisimilitude because they lived it, right? I think that it comes across more authentically. And so, you know, again, to, you know, credit goes, you know, a ton to Scott for having a lot of delicacy, as well as, you know, to Sean Cawthon and a couple of other editors who, you know, Sean was our DP, and I think it, you know, it's kind of like it starts from the leadership of Nickelodeon, and then it also comes from the subjects, right? And so if they reflect it so appropriately, that makes our job easier. Scott, like how do you think, like when you look at it, because I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I look at it more critically probably than other people, but that's something that I was really proud of that we learned about.
I think it's the fact that we didn't have to push it at all. It was just so organic.
Exactly,
I mean, that's what happened. The number one person was Geraldine Labor, and the number two person was Anne Sweeney. And then the person who started Nicktoons was Vanessa Coffey.
Right.
Nick Jr. existed in kind of a beta testing sort of way, but Angela Santamero was the one that made it what it is. And all these shows now where kids talk to the TV, where's Boots? Where's the square? And the kids at home are like, right there. He's right there. That interacting, the Blues Clues, and that's everywhere now. And she started that, so it was organic, and with a lot of our interviews, we weren't like pushing that, we would just ask them, tell the truth, and it came out that way, and that was one thing that, and Geraldine Laborn was quick to say that, like, I wasn't trying to promote women, I wasn't trying to say, oh, if you're a woman, I want to push for women. It just happened, Anne Sweeney, who was Geraldine Laborn's second in command, and she's in the doc a lot and gives a just brilliant interview. And she went on to be like the president of the Disney Channel. Like she was there's articles you can find where it says like she's the most powerful woman in media. And she was a secretary at Nickelodeon. And Geraldine Laborn saw her and was like, yeah, no, this isn't where you belong. Right. And obviously she was right, like the ability to spot that talent, to go, no, you don't belong here. That's like almost like wizardry. That's like some Gandalf level stuff right there, magical. So yeah, that's how we crafted. And Adam and I were very aware of our demographic, and we didn't want to be two white dudes telling people, this, that, and the other, and pushing a narrative. And we were also, we tried to get people that were different than us involved in the film. And that led to the film being so much better than it would have been had it been just us. We had a producer, her name is Elisa Reyes, and she was on Nickelodeon. And she's just freaking amazing. She was an actor on All That, and we reached out to her and we're like, hey, would you want to be interviewed for the documentary? And she's like, yeah, I would. This sounds good. That sounds good. And then she called me back a few minutes later and she's like, hey, I'm still totally down to be interviewed. That's great, but can I be more involved? And we're like, yes. And she's like, yeah. She's like, I think this is a good project and I want to be more involved, like maybe a producer. And she just got to work. And the reason why we booked a lot of those people was 100% because of her. Like like for example, Kenan Thompson, we're interviewing her and she's sitting there, and she's preparing for an interview and she's texting and she's like, oh, Kenan's totally down to do it. We're like, what? She got us Larissa Olenek from, she did a lot of hard work on the film, and also just kind of being able to look at the film through different eyes, like showing her cuts and stuff like that, and her saying, I think you should do this, I think you should do that, was amazing. We had another really wonderful producer named Suzanne Scudder, who was based out of New York, and she worked at Nickelodeon back at the time. And she helped us book a lot of people and was able to give us a lot of insight because she worked at Nickelodeon during this golden years era. So she helped us a lot and helped us, just guide it. Another fantastic person that worked on the film is Allie Clark. Our opening titles, I think that's one of the coolest things. Oh yeah, that was honestly, we got to be a fan of that because we didn't do that. Like the rest of it's like, oh yeah, we're the ones doing the interviews and we're editing it. But that was something that a guy named Justin Harder, who is best known for doing the end credits for Deadpool. Funny story. He's the guy who's best known for doing the end credits of Deadpool. I knew him. That's why we got it. Like, I worked on a film about saving yourself until marriage. with Justin Harder.
Wow.
Where we were like pretending to be like when we were super young, we were both actors in this this thing that's like save yourself, and it was like kind of I don't really understand what it was to this very day. It was like equating it to like being on an island and not trying to like swim out, like just waiting.
That's right, because you were like let's watch it. I remember it because you were like, hey, watch out for the STDs, and it was like the sharks traveling downward.
Yeah. It was super silly. And so I was like, hey, man, I don't know if you remember me, but like we worked on this like church video today when we were like really young. Like, would you want to do this? And because Nickelodeon, that's the thing that we had to our advantage, because Nickelodeon, everybody is passionate about it. Like everybody, both people that were ready to be interviewed, as well as people like vendors, like editors and camera people. Everyone was like, oh, hell yeah, I'll do that. I'll do it for nothing. This sounds amazing. So Justin did it. And then Allie Clark, who her and her husband worked for a company called Window Pictures. And that's like, they did like the Glow documentary and Rock-afire Explosion. And Allie does a lot of their like their animation, like their lower thirds and their intro. And so she took Justin's pictures that were already super badass, and she animated it like that. And like we saw it and we're like, oh hell yeah, like this is great. Like I was geeking out on it. It's like, this is perfect. Like this is great.
Well, because it's really cool looking, but it feels a little bit punk and a little bit rough. And I honestly think if anybody sees the movie and thinks it was produced by Nickelodeon, that's a bit of a compliment to your production idea, because it honestly feels of a piece. Like it does have that kind of like, I love what comes up in the movie about how the Nickelodeon logo always looks like it's defacing whatever it's on, you know? And I never thought much about that, but then I was like, yeah, it always had that effect. But I feel like the opening titles really made me feel like I was dipping into that Nickelodeon feel.
Thanks for saying that. That was one thing from the very beginning. We wanted to establish ourselves as like, this is not made by Nickelodeon. Like, how do we let people know this is about Nickelodeon? You know, because you do have to be aware of like marketing and advertising and all that stuff. We wanted to let people know it was made by Nickelodeon. Well, also like, how do we establish our own like brand or whatever you want to call it? Like, how do we establish our own identity that this is the Orange Years, this is not Nickelodeon? But kind of reminisce it. So, and I think that opening credits, the color she uses, it's like a burgundy is in there. Like I never would have thought of that. And it totally does. You see it and you're like, Nickelodeon. Automatically you see it and you know. But it does not feel made by Nickelodeon. To me anyways, it feels like this is something else. Like you said, thanks for saying that. I really appreciate you saying like a punk or rock and roll kind of thing. Like it just because that's the thing. This wasn't made by Nickelodeon. This is an outsider taking a look in, which I think is always infinitely more interesting than documentaries that are made by the person that it's about.
So overall, it sounds like a lot of things really worked well, very in your favor. Like, you know, through the time you guys came up with the idea of getting this out, we're very interested in like just the production process, the making of, like how you guys did all this. You mentioned the Indiegogo. Like, you know, I'm curious, you know, with all this positivity, people willing to participate, you know, coming across a producer who was able to open more doors for you. Like, can you talk to us about like some of the challenges, if any, like just in terms of the production process? Like, I remember seeing the Indiegogo like end of 2016-ish. Like what is that process from then to now? And like, just what's that gap for you? Like a lot of positive, which is great to hear, but like what's some of the most challenging stuff like you had to face doing this, you know, on your own, basically?
You know, I think the two hardest parts were the beginning and the end, almost, honestly. What I mean by that is that you know, there was a point in time whenever we were doing the Indiegogo that we didn't know if it was good. I mean, like we had done it as like a flex fund, right? So it was like, okay, well, we'll get a certain amount no matter what, and then we'll see what we can do, right? And then we were, it was the night of you know, the deadline. And we were pretty much like, okay, we're not going to hit our goal. And so Scott and I were talking, and we were joking around.
Yeah.
That they were like, for a month, we're just gonna, every single promotional item we put afterwards, we're gonna put hashtag so disappointed.
Yeah,
just
so disappointed.
like, well, we didn't hit our goal, but
so disappointed.
So disappointed. Just hanging out, getting ready to go. So disappointed. So I went to see a movie. I remember I went and saw. My goodness gracious, it wasn't Harry Potter. It was Fantastic Beasts. right? And then I got I came out of the, I talked to him beforehand, and I was like, all right, well, we'll check it and we'll see what happens. Then we came back out, and I looked, and I had a voicemail, and it was like, and it was like, hey, we did it. Like, we totally did it. Like, somebody came in at the last minute and like apparently was just waiting to see if it was going to happen, and then like did it, right? So everything that we did on that, like, that was just us two, right? Well, we did have Jeff Johnson and a couple, and Justin Harder and a couple of people helping with some promotional items, right? Some animation, which was really cool, and like cartoons, like you could Nicktoon yourself. But everything else was just like, it's like we didn't have a marketing team that was making it for us, right? Or making the videos or anything. So like, we were both working, our normal jobs. And then I would come down to Houston. We would, go and, rent out a camping site for the night. And then we would just film for the Are You Afraid of the Dark segment. And then we would go to a football field and film for Pete and Pete. And then we would go doing this and this. And then, the film obviously was a challenge to make, just like any film is. But then at the end, once we finished, everything happened kind of in November, right? Like November 2016.
I feel like a lot happened in November of 2016. But maybe that's
I can't remember it. And we certainly got no messages based on the name of our film about what this film was going to be about.
Yeah,
and we're not getting them again right now. It's definitely not happening.
No, not at all. Like, yeah, I remember somebody posting and going, so is this, we got it so many times, so is this about Donald Trump?
That was our first Facebook message.
Yeah,
no, it's about circus peanuts.
It is, actually. Yeah. It is. It's about it's about circus peanuts, and whether they're poisonous or whether they're even still made. Somehow we managed to have
Where are they made?
Where? And it's an hour and a half long for us to figure that out. And then at the end, we're like, Nebraska. And it's that. But so like then we finished it at, we went to Doc NYC, and was such a great night because, Geraldine Laybourne and her husband like threw a party for us, which was so crazy. And it was interesting because like Larissa Olenek was there, and she had drinks with us, and Denny Tamborelli and David Vogler, who created GAC, and like Nick.com. And, and so we were just like kind of watching all of these people reconnect. Right. And it was just like, we don't belong here, but it was so cool. And then like, then you go into the process of trying to get it distributed. Right. And that just takes time. Right. And so sometimes you get a situation where, we worked with one distributor, and we were super jazzed and pumped up. And then for whatever reasons, largely because of COVID, things change. Right. I mean, you see companies right now that are like, hey, we're not making, like look at Glow. Glow just got canceled. Right. Yeah. And it's like, how's that possible? Because that was like a critically acclaimed show that's amazing, that has such talent. And so then there's this, and we had feedback from fans, like they're passionate, right? And, and you have people that are like, hey, listen, is this ever going to actually happen? Did you like,
we got that so much. Yeah.
And it's, and so it's like, you do feel pressure because you feel like, hey, we have a responsibility to tell this story, not only for people that care about it, right, that grew up with it, but also to the people that were in it. And, and we want to get it out for them. And so those were the two biggest challenges, I think, that, I personally thought that we had. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, for me, like Adam said, making a film, it's just hard. Like, there's no way around it, especially if you're making on a micro budget, where, on a big budget movie, the director's not holding a camera. Even a lot of times the cinematographer isn't holding a camera, but there were a lot of times where it was me and Adam, and I'm pointing the camera at somebody, and he's, asking him questions and stuff. And, there was just a lot of work, but it was never bad because it was so much fun. Like when we went to Nickelodeon, or when we went to Los Angeles, and we were working from sun up to sundown. And then once we were done filming, you got to get all that footage off the cards. You got to recharge your batteries. You got to get all that stuff. So, I mean, we were just working, 10, 12-hour days and getting a couple hours of sleep and up. But how am I going to complain where in one day I met Danny Cooksey, who played Budnick, Mark Summers, the guy who created Salute Your Shorts, Lori Beth Denberg, Elisa Reyes. How am I going to complain about? Like, I'm having the time of my life. You know, we go to New York, and I'm sitting there talking to Kenan Thompson, and then later on that day, I'm talking to the guy that made Gak. Like, how am I ever going to freaking complain about that? Like, it's so that part. What some people might think, like, that was like the hard work, but it wasn't bad at all because it was so much fun. And then editing it was really fun because you're looking at all this footage and you're kind of reliving it again. And that's, to me, where you can be real creative and you're like, oh, this person said this, Kenan said this, so I can match it up with Kel saying this, and it'll go really well together when you find those moments that click. So all of those moments were great. The parts that for me were difficult was a lot of the hurry up and wait moments. Like, it felt like nothing was happening for the film. And then all of a sudden, like when we got into Doc NYC, it was like, it felt like nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden our producer, I'm going to give another shout out, Lee Leshin, fantastic dude. He's produced a ton of great documentaries. Back in Time, that's the Back to the Future one. Ghost Heads. That's a fantastic one. He just did one, Waldo on Weed, that he got to work with like Whoopi Goldberg on. It's an amazing. He's a great dude. But he submitted us to Doc NYC, and he's like, "Hey guys, submitted to Doc NYC." We're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And he's like, "Oh yeah, they need the film done like there's like 3 weeks," and we're like, what? What? So I didn't sleep for like a solid week. It was like I would be just work because they would accept a rough cut, but it still had to be pretty good, And so it was like nothing happened with the film. And then all of a sudden we got into Doc NYC, which was amazing. And we were getting written up, and like we're seeing like Entertainment Weekly and E are like writing these articles for a film that's like not even done. Like I'm sitting there in my office like, oh shit, I hope it's good. And so it was like the hurry up and wait moments were what was hard for me because it felt like, and then really similar to what Adam said, because we were so hands-on, and that's what I loved about this film is we got to be so hands-on from the moment we started storyboarding it, booking the interviews, the way we shot it. We didn't have anyone really telling us what to do. It was amazing. That was the amazing part of making such a small budget film is we could do whatever the hell we wanted to. Like I even got to record a song for it. Like it's like I couldn't find a song that I wanted. I was like, I want something that kind of sounds like Dinosaur Jr. or Superchunk, and I just couldn't find anything. So I called up my friend Jeff, who also did the animation. I was like, hey dude, can we just book a studio and just record some music? So we just recorded music. It was so much fun. And we got to be so hands-on and get our hands dirty and just have an amazing time every step of the way. It was the parts where we weren't involved that were difficult for me because I didn't know what the hell was going on. And you have to trust that other people do, So we were very fortunate to get to work with Adam F. Goldberg on this film. He came on as an executive producer. He's I can't say enough good things about that guy. So many people that make it just turn out to be jerks or whatever. This guy, what he does is he finds docs like ours and just helps them cross the finish line. He's not going to help you make it. He's not going to hold your hand. And he let us do whatever we wanted. But he came in after we were pretty much done. We had almost everything done. And he saw we had actually already cut a trailer. And he saw it and was like, I like this. I want to help you guys. So he helped us book some interviews and all sorts of stuff. And then through him, we got a lot of people calling us like agents and distributors. And that was like, we're like, whoa, like this is something like I had no idea. I know how to work a camera. I know how to book an interview. I know how to edit. I know how to do all this stuff. I got a lot of friends that are really talented. So if we need lower thirds or animation or music, I know what to do. But that was the one where I was like, they're like, well, we're going to have some meetings with Netflix and then maybe Hulu, and we might even try to pitch it to Nickelodeon. And I have no idea. I don't know anything about that world. We just had to trust our agent and trust what was happening because they're also, they're not and that's just what we had to learn. It's not like they're calling you all the time. Like all of us working on the film called each other and talked all the time. We knew if there was something holding it up, like if Adam's waiting on a cut from me, he could be like, hey dude, are you working on that, the Nick Jr. segment? I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm almost done. It's coming. But with that, we just had to trust him. And the company that repped us was called Endeavor Films. And they were amazing. They did great. But it was just, like the Tom Petty song, the waiting is the hardest part. It was just kind of difficult, sitting there going like, I don't know what's happening. And like, then once they would get it in the hands of people, we had to wait for them, like a distributor would. Sure. And there was a great distributor that we got, a deal with, and through COVID, they had to call us back and say, "Hey, I know we're about to put your movie out, but and this is after like a year of us like having the movie being sold. They had to call us back and be like, due to COVID, we're not able to do it anymore. So we had to go back to square one and go back to people and ask for distribution deals. And luckily, we got a deal with Gravitas Ventures. They're awesome. They put out Bill Murray stories. I had a lot of friends that had worked with them in the past. Bradford, one of our editors, he had a couple of films, Jasper Mall, that was put out by them, and then
We've talked about that on this.
Are
podcast.
you serious?
Yeah.
That's a fantastic film. That's a flex.
No, I love it.
there.
It's one of those fly on the wall movies that we were talking about documentaries that you guys removed yourselves as much as possible from this movie. That's one of those where it's like it's almost completely like you totally let the footage tell the story.
There's no interview in it. It's all cinema verite. So whenever I saw that movie, I was like, he's so good. Those guys are so good. It's like, you know what? Maybe I'm not cut out for this documentary work. Like, it's a movie about a dying mall, and it's only got these people that live in Alabama, and somehow it's actually more interesting than most documentaries. Like, that's a flex, right? That's a couple of really talented dudes going, hey, look what I can do, and they all the credit in the world to them. So anyway, those were the hardest parts for me: the hurry up and wait, and the parts where we weren't involved. But hey, it worked out, and we're really happy to work with Gravitas.
Were there any white whales? Was there anybody who you circled for a while and couldn't get, or anybody that you really thought would be like perfect for this and it just didn't work out? I know you don't want to accentuate the negative, like Steve said, but I do think that would be interesting to know if there was anybody who kind of left you in the lurch. Scott seems to have an answer.
Well, I was more thinking how I want to answer it.
Okay.
I mean, there's always more people, and that's another thing that Adam and I had to talk about. Like, when do we could make this movie for like 10 years. You know, we were even at the end, we were getting people, because then once we got the momentum, then people were calling us saying like, hey, I'd love to do this. And it's like, we got to call this, like, we got enough, you know? So let me talk to PR. Can we talk about this? Can we? Okay. Adam's giving me a thumbs up. We can talk about this. There were a couple of people. There were a couple of shows. You know, obviously, only through death, we didn't get to talk to Mr. Wizard. I would love to have had a little. I would love to have had a Mr. Wizard segment, but you know, unfortunately, Don Herbert's not with us anymore.
I cried when he died, man.
Dude,
I when I heard the news, it was devastating. I remember Mr. Wizard was Bill Nye before Bill Nye.
Yeah,
and I think that people just don't know the impact of that show.
And it holds up. It holds up. You go back and you watch Mr. Wizard, and other than the computer segments were like, watch this, my computer can talk. It's like, hello, Jimmy. It's like, that doesn't hold up. But all the other, like, how he's like blowing stuff up, like it.
Yeah, the experiments. Yeah.
The thing I think about all the time with Mr. Wizard is the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. Where like the thinker is like, it dawns on him. Like he's like, I finally had a thought. It's like, thanks, Mr. Wizard.
Mr. Wizard had two lives in me and Adam's life as well. Like one when we were like 8 or 9 and we were watching it, legitimately thought it was cool, you know, like for what it was. And then again when we were about like 16 or 17 and it came on at like 4 a.m, and we're two teenage boys early in the morning. We'd been, you know, whatever. And it's really funny to watch that. We're like, whoa, dude, they're blowing shit up, man. It's crazy. Like, it was just really fun it's one of those things where it had two lives. We watched it very innocently as little boys, and then later on when it came on, like in the middle of it, kind of like it was almost like an Adult Swim on accident. You know, you're watching, you're like, whoa, this is crazy.
We almost interviewed Amanda Bynes, and we talked to her team. I think that the one that we hear people ask, which is so funny because she was barely on the show, is they're like, did you get Alanis Morissette? And we're like, no, we didn't reach out to her. And we were like, and also we were going to get Dave Coulier, so we would have had a conflict of interest.
Right.
We really were trying to get Dave Coulier, and we thought we were going to do it because of the Ghost Heads connection with our producer. Because, you know, Dave Coulier did the Bill Murray voice for the Ghostbusters, the animated. Yeah. So he knew him, and we're like, let's get Dave Coulier. Because remember there was that show called, it was where he first did the Cut it out. Out of control. It was called Out of Control.
Right. Yeah.
And that's for me, like
Diz. Am I
with
remembering
Diz,
that?
Diz,
Character named
yeah.
Diz?
Yes, who had that weird voice, that noise.
Yeah.
that he did. Yeah.
And that's really what I wish we could have dove into even more is some of the like really obscure shows that nobody ever remembers, like Out of Control or Roundhouse. There's a show called My Brother.
My brother.
Yeah.
Are you gonna say my
My brother and me.
My Brother
Yeah.
and Me. Yeah, I really wanted to do
Goo
My
Punch?
Brother and Me.
With Alfie and Dee Dee.
Yes. Goo
Yeah.
Punch is like one of my favorite episodes.
To
Goo
this-
Punch.
Goo Punch.
good.
And the
So-
one where he's like, hit me.
Yeah, that's the one everyone remembers. Yeah, Hit Me. So the funny thing about My Brother and Me is like, all these Nickelodeon shows are known for being like kind of naughty. Like that's what everyone always remembers, right? Like, oh, Ren and Stimpy, there's all these like sexual innuendos. But there was like 3 shows from Nickelodeon that were not, they were just about kids being awesome to each other. And to me, they're almost like more rebellious because they didn't do that. Hey, dude, Doug. There's no, when you look back at Doug, it was the only Nicktoon that has nothing.
Yeah.
And then My Brother and Me. Like at the end of the day, Alfie and Dee Dee, they had their problems with each other, but they were like good brothers to each other. They took care of each other.
Yeah.
And even the Goo, he was like kind of like he was like what was the Leave It to Beaver Kid? He was like the modern day
Eddie Haskell.
Eddie Haskell, yeah.
Haskell.
But at the end of the day, he was a good person and their family was good, And I think that for a lot of kids that were struggling, that maybe came from broken homes, that maybe were getting bullied, that didn't have an ideal childhood, those shows actually meant more to them because they can see a show where kids are being cool to each other.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to go. Part of it, there's 3 main reasons why we couldn't do a show. One, if we couldn't interview anybody, that's one.
Understood.
And if people say no, they say no, and there's nothing we can do about that. And then if we can't get access to the footage, and 3, if it just kind of doesn't make sense in the narrative. And like Roundhouse, it's a bummer that we had to, or Wienerville, I really wanted to do Wienerville, but My Brother and Me to me is an important show on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
But, some of the people that were involved in that, they had bad experiences with the media, like exploiting them. And they were like, not right now, not right. And it's like, okay, I mean, we had to respect that, so that's one that I wish we could have done. Cause I think that was a super cool show. And it's kind of one of those shows that to me gets overlooked criminally. But yeah, those are some of from
Steve,
my
who was
white
it-
whales.
who was the one that you were thinking?
Well, my show from Snick, I have shirts. Like I'm obsessed with Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh,
God.
And
Dude, I never say your name right. There's been like 3 times that somebody's like said, no, you say it this way. No, you say it that way. And I'm like, the best like actress, like yes, like she's no. We didn't get a chance to. We got to talk to a lot of the team from as you know from Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah.
But she would have been awesome to talk to.
Yeah.
And I mean, because not just because of Are You Afraid of the Dark, but also because she's done so many other like amazing shows.
Yeah.
I mean, like Happy Endings, and then obviously like The Girl Next Door has like cult status,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
It's an all-timer.
yeah, and so she's amazing. And it's funny because like it's you're almost in this like weird like bizarro world where you're sitting there like for example at Doc NYC and you're having a beer with Larissa Olenek, right? Who like is an amazing actress, and she's not just an amazing actress whenever it comes to just like traditional performance. Like she was cast like originally in Les Mis, right? So she is like an amazing singer, and she's just like you're talking to her, and then it's funny because of course somebody's like, oh hey, oh my gosh, I had such a huge crush on Alex Mack. Should I tell her? And we're like, everybody had a crush on Alex Mack. Like, don't you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's weird because you're watching and you're meeting people that are, that shaped your childhood, right? That you grew up idolizing, and then you're like, oh, that's right. They're like just human beings.
They're people, yeah.
Right? They're people, and then they come to support what you do, supporting them. Right, but what I mean. It's like you're
and so many of those people have done so much since they did the thing that you remember them for, or that you were talking to them about. So some of that was like, remember this person, look how they've aged.
Yeah.
But then when you contrast that with the Kenan Thompsons, the people who've had like a consistent career, and a guy who honestly, he right now is like even a better get than he would have been just a few years ago. I feel
totally.
like people are finally talking about what like a savior he is for that show. How he can pull a shit sketch out of the ditch. Just a look sometimes.
He carries
he's a
SNL.
ninja.
Yeah, he does.
He's incredible.
We had that a lot where there was people that went on to have these crazy amazing careers. Like there's a guy, Graham Yost, and he was one of the original writer directors of Hey Dude. And he went on, you look at Speed, you know what I mean? Like he did Speed and Band of Brothers, and he's Justified. He's crazy. And we were like, man, I wonder if we'll be able to get him. And we interviewed him, and he's like, oh, hell yeah. Everyone always asks me about Speed. They come up to me like, hey, man, I'm a huge fan of, and it's always Speed. And so the fact that you guys are wanting to talk to me about Hey Dude, like a lot of people don't even remember. He's like, I'm totally down, because that's where he learned his craft. It's kind of like the way the same passion that Adam and I have right now talking about our film. Like he's like, that's where I learned to write. That's where I learned to direct, was on Hey Dude. And Keenan was the same way. Like we're emailing him, and he's like, hey guys, thanks for He said yes to do our movie, which there is the biggest favor. I mean, that upped our movie so much. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he thanked us. Like, what a guy. What a freaking guy. Like, there's not, and he's like, I'm just excited to see this movie, because I think it's going to be a good movie. And he was really excited because, more people want to talk to him. Keenan and Kel and Good Burger has kind of, now it's experiencing this resurgence. But, everyone wants to talk to him more about Saturday Night Live. So for him to get a chance to talk about his childhood, he was really pumped. And he was like, awesome. It's so funny. He was everyone in the film was nice, right? Like everybody, every single person we interviewed was like so kind. But that dude took it to another freaking level. And the fact that he's one of the biggest, he's one of the biggest stars out there. You know what I mean? And we're like, hey, do you need, because one thing that we would do is offer people like, do you want hair and makeup? Because that's the least we can do. You're appearing in our film. Right. We at least, if you want to look good, we'll feed you. We'll do hair and makeup, and we'll give you a ride there. And he was like, no, man, like, I don't need any of that. I'm not trying to get hair and makeup, man. Like, I look like me.
Remember, he's like, because he goes, because we were like, we can get you, we'll send over, you need an Uber, valet, whatever it is. And he's like, no, I know how to park in New York. I'm good. And like, then we, and then like when we talked to him, I was like, because I hate the New York Yankees like so much, and so he was wearing a New York Yankees hat, and I was like, we were about to interview him, and I'm like, oh man, so are you a Yankees fan? Because he had a black on black Yankees hat, and he's like, nah, I'm kind of a fan of just wearing clothes until they rip up. And I was like, and he was like, this was black. It matched my shirt.
So I did it. Yeah.
It's like, cool.
Such a cool dude.
Awesome.
Such a cool dude.
You know what I mean? And he very easily could have just been like, walked in and been like, okay, I'm going to give you guys 15 minutes. Like,
he gave us just as much time.
And it still would have been great, even if that's all he did.
If all we got was
so thankful.
If all we did was get him on camera and go, yeah, man, I was in Good Burger, bye. Like, that would have been amazing. He gave us like, in his interviews, he answered the questions like so thoughtfully and was so respectful. Like the way he talks about his all that co-stars was like so from the heart. He gave everybody props. And, to go back to Anne Sweeney, she lived up in the Hollywood Hills. She's like, oh, yeah, that's like Elon Musk's house over there. And she was like, come on in. I've got you guys sandwiches and stuff. Like, people that did not need to give us the time of day were willing to. And it was for Nickelodeon. It was one, because they're a good person. And also because Nickelodeon was something that was really, really beautiful. It was a really beautiful time in their lives, and they're happy to talk about it.
Yeah. And it's informative, and I think that like Scott said, it's interesting because I compare a lot of like filmmaking to a degree to athletics, right? And so it's like you're learning your reps, and so like you're even for the Miami Heat or Los Angeles Lakers, like working together, you have to learn each other's rhythm. Right. And like pace. And so, you get better as seasons go on. So like, for example, like I'm sure Scott and I would work a million times better. As much as it was a blessing to get to work with Scott, the next time around would be a million times better. Right. And so you can learn so much and gained so much perspective on how you should be and treat people and how you should work by watching Kenan Thompson, Larissa Olenek, Geraldine Laybourne, Anne Sweeney, all these people that have made it, right? They've made it, and then they've gone to another career and made it, right? You know what I mean? So there's like, yeah, they made it again. And yet all of them, like, were making us food, right? Danny Cooksey, the first person that we interviewed, we came in and he was like, hey man, we ordered y'all pizza and some drinks. Like, y'all want to just chill out for a second? And we were like,
such a kind dude.
Are you sure?
I guess.
Like,
Oh wow.
That, yeah, I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. And so that just kind of, I mean, there's no way that you can ever, and why would we have ego? Because it's like we made a documentary, right? Like if I walked outside right now, my next door neighbor, and I was like, I made a movie, they would be like, shut up and go inside. Right? It's late. It's the pandemic.
No, it's a doc.
Yeah.
It's a doc. And they're like, go inside.
Yeah, we don't care. And I'm like,
I think it's interesting. You guys have content here, though, that a lot of people are going to have that emotional reaction to. You know, like even as someone who was a little old when Nickelodeon got started, like when I was going into middle school was when a lot of the programming you were talking about got started. And then by the time the stuff you guys are really nostalgic for kicked in, I was class of 91. That's when I graduated. So I was a little bit old for it, but I always saw Nickelodeon as being like, I mean, it's interestingly related in my mind to that Mr. Rogers documentary from a couple of years ago that was so well liked. Won't You Be My Neighbor? Great doc. And yet it's about kind of reassessing, reappreciating what Mr. Rogers did. A lot of people who maybe never gave him a second thought or thought he was kind of corny or kind of cheesy saw that doc and were like, oh, you know what? What he was doing really was cool, and what he represented really was cool. But I think Nickelodeon, it's like, and I'm a Mr. Rogers stan, you know, but to me, the Nickelodeon connection is like, it's going to make people feel different because that wasn't like, here's Mr. Rogers, here's a nice man everyone agrees you should be sitting down to watch Mr. Rogers because he's such a nice man and it's so calm and it's so here for you and it's here to instill these values in you. Nickelodeon almost felt like it was that kind of junior version of MTV. It was that like, this is almost a channel that feels like it's made by kids. Like, how are they getting this stuff on the air? There was something kind of... you know, if not Ren and Stimpy naughty, but there was something kind of misbehavior related.
So many of the shows, were irreverent.
And I think that there is something about that idea of this is what kids are really like, in a sense. And I started just feeling that, and I remembered that feeling. Even though I was getting a little old for it, I would sometimes come home after school and watch a little Nick, just because it had that feeling of like, who's running this channel? Who's letting them put this on? How did this show get on the air? So it's interesting. I really think people are going to have whatever they think of the movie, they're going to have an emotional response almost immediately to some part of it. For me, it may have been seeing Christine from You Can't Do That on Television. That I was just like, oh yeah, Christine, oh my God. I mean, like that was like that was a crush of mine when I was, in my formative years.
Sure,
and I don't even know if I had that word for it back then. Well, but I think that there's a lot of that. These people just seem cool. And what you're saying is a lot of them remember this time really fondly.
And Ren and Stimpy was on both. It was the same show on Nickelodeon and MTV. It wasn't like it was edited for one or the other. So there was definitely a crossover. I mean, it was literally the same show on two different channels at different times. But, so, I mean, Nickelodeon definitely was like a baby MTV, and they knew that. And they were, they were both owned by the same parent company. And there was a massive amounts of irreverence on there. All those shows. I can remember Salute Your Shorts. One of the kids is like, I'm pissed off. And it's like, whoa, like, can you say that on Nickelodeon? I guess they said it. And I think that people will have, I hope people have an emotional reaction to it because you're seeing these things. And that's one thing that from the very beginning that we wanted to look at, everyone always feels that the music, the art, whatever that was popular when they were little kids was the best. People are like, fit music in the 50s was the best. Howdy Doody was the best. Mad Magazine was the best. And everybody feels that way, man, they made the best time for movies was blank, and it's always when that person was young, and we wanted to look at that, like, are people that are, Generation X and like older millennials obviously all love Nickelodeon. When you say like Kenan and Kel, or you say like Salute Your Shorts, people go nuts. Is that just because that's what was popular when they were little. And it reminds them of being little. And they're like, oh, that's cool. I feel good because I saw this when I was little. Or was there actually something there? So that's what we hope to do with this movie, is to dissect. One of the things that, one of the taglines we used was like, you fell in love with it, it's time to find out why. Like, we're kind of pulling that curtain back and going, why were you connected to this in ways that, I watched Mickey Mouse Club when I was a kid, and I don't give a shit about it. Do you guys cuss on this? Like,
yes.
Sorry.
It's encouraged. It's encouraged.
I don't care about that. I don't care about Mickey Mouse Club as I got older. There are a lot of shows. I thought that I really loved Transformers when I was a little kid.
I was gonna say that.
And when I tried to watch it with my son who's 8, and I was like, man, this show is like just a freaking commercial. There's nothing to this movie, or to this show. There's nothing there. And I mean, it's still cool to play with a robot that turns into a diesel, don't get me wrong, but there was nothing to that show. And with Nickelodeon, I truly feel that it's not just nostalgia. There was a reason, like just what you said, John. It felt, how did adults make a show that actually felt like it was made by kids? You really felt like kids were making this. How did they do that? Well, we hope to show you how they did that. And so much of that is Geraldine Laybourne and her background. And to go back to the feminist issue, which we're not trying to push, but because she had it's great to find people with other worldviews than yourself. Do it, please. It's amazing to do that. And the fact that all these other people that ran Nickelodeon were these businessmen, like, let's crunch some numbers. We're showing that kids like poop, farts, and whatever, toys, robots, and explosions. Like, she was a teacher and she was a woman, and she was like, no, that's not how you get to kids. That's a lot of the things that people thought kids were into was actually pandering and was talking down to kids. And without going into it too much, I think that you'll find, if when people watch the film, which I hope you do, it wasn't just an accident. There was a lot of meticulous effort by some talented people to make these shows, these things that we all love, like 30 and 40 years later.
Well, I hope that people. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, and then I'll ask.
No, after you.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to say, I wanted to thank you because, in a lot of ways, sometimes when you're talking about something that affected you as a kid, it's really hard to articulate it in a way that feels like tangible. Like Nickelodeon affected all of us in a very particular way, in unique ways. And sometimes not having the historical context, something tangible that we could show somebody, makes all the difference in the world to have something I can be like, oh, you weren't alive? You weren't watching TV? Here's something you can watch that has a pretty comprehensive look at that. I want to thank you for that. That's part one.
Oh, thanks.
And then part two, I need you guys to tell me your top 5 shows from Nickelodeon each. Each of you need to tell me your top 5 shows.
I'm gonna let you go first, Scott, because I may have to pivot.
Yeah.
On that.
So, Adam, I'll give you some time to think about that, because we get asked that, and that's a super, especially after we got to know people. It's a great question, but because then once we got to know the creator, so you think of it, Adam. John, I want to tell you a funny story that I think you'll appreciate. You say you got a crush on Christine, who was also known as Moose.
Yes.
That show is all Canadian. And I wish we got to go to Canada and interview them. And I got to stay at her house and eat. You know what poutine is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like super, it's like the Canadian food. I got to eat poutine with Moose in her house in Canada. And I was like, you know what? If I die on the way home, if my plane blows up, I've done everything I wanted to do on Earth. I don't care.
Well, she came to South by Southwest also.
Yeah.
She's
an
educator and an app developer, right? So she works with Geraldine Laybourne for children's education and programming now.
That's awesome.
I thought you were talking about Christine Taylor. I thought you were talking about Melody from Hey Dude.
No, I was going back further. I was talking about
different Chrissy.
But also very crushworthy.
But also
definitely.
very crushworthy.
Yeah,
and Ted as well. So let's just give shout out to all crushes. So just crushing on everybody.
And then later on, Ted got with Clarissa on Sabrina. Like the two Nickelodeon people got together.
Yeah.
Funny story. There's a Sabrina movie that still has Melissa Joan Hart, but it looks totally different.
Yep.
It's filmed like a movie, and all the other characters, and her love interest in that is Ryan frickin' Reynolds, Deadpool, who also got his start on Nickelodeon. Boom.
Yep.
Wow.
We just leave and you're like,
Connected.
so about
That's
the-
it. That's it.
Yes, it's like the MCU. So top five. So top. Gosh, this is so tough. In no particular order. Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Yeah. Toby Huss.
Oh God, we talk about him all the time. He is the one that we didn't get. That to
He's
me
the white whale.
is
That's the white whale.
he is the white
Yeah.
whale.
I love that guy. But at least you got in a segment on Artie, the strongest man in the world.
We had
Yeah,
to.
Yeah.
Like in our crowdfund, like I dressed up as Artie and like tweeted out to him and I was like, hey, what's up? And he was like, not bad, boy, not bad. And I was like, will you please? I was like, awesome, you should please do something for our documentary. And he was like, it was just nothing. Because he's got stuff to do. You know what I mean? Like, and he's still like crushing it.
Real quick, that's another MTV Nickelodeon crossover because me and Adam loved it. He was on MTV and he had that thing where he was like pretending to be Frank Sinatra. Me and Adam watched that all the time.
Promos.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like,
Is that
you
what you're
may
talking
kill
about?
my father, Mr. Boozerini, but you shall never kill me.
Those promos were insane.
He
I
would
loved
sing
those.
he would sing songs like
Insane in the Membrane.
He like insane in the membrane, but like all like in the style of like the Rat Pack. Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, you're good.
He's great.
Are You Afraid of the Dark? Adventures of Pete and Pete. Salute Your Shorts. Oh gosh, I'm gonna say The Secret World of Alex Mack. Even though I do think Clarissa Explains It All is just as it was like the original. Oh my gosh, this is so bad. I feel bad. I need to put an animated one in there also. I got to go Ren and Stimpy. Right, because it was because I liked Doug, I liked Rugrats, I liked Real Monsters, which deserve more love. But like Ren and Stimpy was definitely the one that I was like, we should not be watching this one.
Right.
And if my mom walks in, there's gonna be hell to pay. So so let's recap. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Adventures of Pete and Pete, Salute Your Shorts, Secret World of Alex Mack, and Ren and Stimpy. Scott.
Ren and Stimpy is the show that literally shook the entertainment industry.
It literally.
Everybody remember that? Like, that was during the Oakland Athletics versus San Francisco Giants World Series. Ren and Stimpy was playing at that time.
I know.
People were like, "What the hell is going on?"
They knew the risks.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Let's
Scott, what
see.
about you?
I would for sure say you can't do that on television because that shaped everything, every single thing. There's obviously the green slime there. There's the naughtiness to it that shaped Nickelodeon for the rest. And there's also like the idea that the parents are idiots and the kids are smart. Yeah. That's in every Nickelodeon show for the most part from then on out. Like on Rugrats, parents are idiots. On Salute Your Shorts, the counselors are idiots. The kid is like a running theme. And that's how you feel when you're a little kid. You think adults are just dumb. And I guess we are. But you can't do that on television for sure. A funny thing, like we found out about this. You Can't Do It on Television was in Canada was much longer and had like live segments and musical guests, kind of like Saturday Night Live.
Oh wow!
When they brought it to America, they cut it down. But yeah, like if you could find clips of You Can't Do It on Television, they literally had they literally had musical guests, and you could call in and talk to them. Like you could
Europe.
It literally shook the world, and I'm literally in hell. So You Can't Do It on Television for sure. I'm going to say Doug, and a weird reason is I fell in love with Jim Jenkins when I met him. He's a beautiful man, brilliant.
And he looks like Doug.
That's
and
weird.
He is Doug.
100%.
He is Doug. He is Doug.
It's
funny because I'm going to stay positive here, right? But whenever I met Jim Jenkins, and then whenever I met, there were cooler creatives. Like we met the guy who did Ren and Stimpy, and when I was a little kid, I would have thought that John Kricfalusi would have been the super cool one. But man, Jim Jenkins is so much cooler, man. He's such an amazing guy. Doug is, I love Doug for what it is. I think that back in the 80s and 90s, there was always so many tropes of like the nerd and then the bully. And Doug just doesn't do that. Doug isn't a nerd, but he's also not the hot guy either. He's just somewhere in the middle, you know?
A guy,
he's just a
yeah.
guy. And I think so many kids feel that way, you know, where it's like, you're not necessarily the nerd. And he's, you know, the whole played out trope of like the 80s nerd that pines after the girl and never gets her. It was in every movie, Teen Wolf, whatever, but they didn't do that. You know, he was a good guy at the end of the day, and all the characters were good to each other. I feel like Doug kind of gets crapped on a little bit because it is a little saccharine, but that's what I love about it, you know?
Yeah.
And it was just a good, solid show. And then 3, I'm going to have to go, since Adam did, Alex Mack, I'll do Clarissa. That's a great show. Clarissa and Alex Mack are both great shows, and Clarissa is awesome. Obviously, like I could go on and on about how groundbreaking it is. We all know that it was.
She gets points for me for being a They Might Be Giants fan.
Yeah.
Right, and that's another one that shows you how forward-thinking Nickelodeon was. Instead of like the fact that they're like, "Hey, let's have this girl be a fan of They Might Be Giants." Like anybody else would be like, "No, no one will get that. They won't know who that is. Have her be fans of New Kids."
Yeah.
But the fact that Nickelodeon was like, we want her to feel like a real person, and Clarissa was kind of like Doug too. She wasn't the nerd, but she wasn't the most pop. She was somewhere in the middle, you know, and I love that.
Yeah.
And it's just a great show. The soundtrack is awesome. And then let's see. So that's 3. I'm gonna go with Salute Your Shorts 2. I freaking just love that show. Me and Adam loved it back when it came on. I've always had a man crush on Danny Cooksey. I mean, come on, he's
The mullet. There's a connection there.
I had
That's spiritual soul, like soulmates, like
we
friends.
were more.
you know?
I always joke that I wanted to be Budnick, but I was actually Sponge. Maybe I was somewhere in the middle, you know. But I love.
And if someone knows what you're talking about when you say that, that's a good litmus test.
Yeah.
Right?
Right,
then,
yeah.
yeah. Then you're definitely a certain age for sure.
Yeah.
But you know, he was also in Terminator 2, and he was in. I gotta plug it. Can I talk about Bad for Good, guys? Okay, they're giving me the cue. I can talk. There's a metal band called Bad for Good, and Danny Cooksey was the singer of it in 1991. And they were all little kids.
Wow.
They were all little kids, and they were put together by Steve Vai, and they're all virtuosos. They're all brilliant musicians, and they were going to be the next big thing, right? They were going to be the next huge thing because they're all kids, but they played just as good as like Motley Crue, Bon Jovi. They were phenoms, and their album came out in a year I call 1991, and you might remember what other album came out in 1991, Nevermind, which essentially flushed the toilet on anything glam rock. So it was like, here we are, guys, and everyone in the world was like, fuck you, we don't want you. So they're one of those bands that if they'd come out 5 years earlier, they would have been brilliant. Everyone would have loved them, and they'd be the hugest stars in the world. Unfortunately, they didn't. They came out in around the same time as Nirvana's Nevermind, and nobody liked it. But Salute Your Shorts was great. They said Pissed Off. There was somebody that you could relate to in that group.
Yes.
You know,
Scott, for a second, I thought you were going to reference the 1991 album Hammer's Too Legit to Quit.
I got to reference that. That's a fantastic album.
Also shook up the world.
Yeah,
I loved Hammer's cartoon show. Remember how Hammer had a cartoon show?
Yes, with the magical shoes.
Yeah, dude.
Shoes.
He
was crazy.
They spoke to him.
They spoke to
By the
him.
way,
He's
real
got
quick,
pants named after him to this
Didn't-
day.
I mean, come on, to this very day.
didn't he have a bodyguard? I don't mean to like derail,
No,
but didn't he have a bodyguard named like Biscuit or something like that on the show?
Yeah.
I think
Something
so.
like that, man. He was like a big dude.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, nobody ever, other than you can't touch this. I was like, whatever happened to like Pray, Too Legit to Quit?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Adam's
Remember
Family
Too
Values.
Legit? Yeah, oh yeah, dude.
Scott,
Adam's Family Values.
so I have to say this really quickly. Scott's a huge karaoke. Okay, so Scott is also really cool. I'm like Scott's hype man at this point. Like he's so talented. He's so talented. Scott has been in like bands, like legitimate bands, and he also loves karaoke. One time I went to a karaoke in Austin, a karaoke bar, and we decided for fun to play Adam's Family Values. That song goes on for 35 minutes.
Oh my god.
And they're like, dear God, cut this off. But I'm sorry, Scott,
He had the fake Michael at the end. Remember where even Michael Jackson, he's like too legit to quit.
And
like,
Deion
even
Sanders.
Michael's a fan.
Yeah. He had them all doing the too legit, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
Sorry. So your fifth one,
okay.
Scott.
Salute your shorts. Yeah, good show. I like the fact that they made the jock. They kind of took stereotypes and put them on their head. Like the girl was the jock, Telly Radford, played by the super talented Venus DeMilo. That was really forward thinking. Let's have the girl be the jock, not the guy. The whole, I could go on forever about the evolution of the Donkey Lips character, but that's another. We could do something else about that. And then fifth, I gotta agree with Adam here. Are You Afraid of the Dark? That show holds up so well. I watch it with my family now, and it's so good. Are You Afraid of the Dark is such an amazing show. And there's a couple of reasons. One, the fact that it shows you how ballsy they were. One, the fact that they're like, hey, we want to make a show, and the sole purpose is to scare the shit out of little kids. Like, that's crazy, And that they had the guts to do that, and also that Nickelodeon had the foresight to go, yeah, let's do it. Fuck it. Yeah, let's scare the shit out of little kids, because it was scary. And a lot of times the kids died at the end. Like, it's not like it worked out. Like, there would be kids trapped in a well or trapped in another dimension.
Remember Tia and Tamara?
Yeah.
The lizard, and they kill one of the lizards. And it turns out it was the wrong lizard.
Yeah.
It was the wrong lizard. Tia killed Tamara. And the
always
other thing,
kill the right lizard.
They always kill the right lizard. Come on, guys. On Are You Afraid of the Dark? You think about any of these other shows that were brilliant in their own way. You make your cast. You cast your 5-6 people, and as long as you cast those well, you're good and you're done. Hey, I got my Donkey Lips, I got my Budnick, I got my Telly, I got my Penske, I'm done, or whatever. You can't do it on television. You got your Moose, you got your Alistair, you got your Kevin Kubicheski, you're done. But on Are You Afraid of the Dark, they had to cast the Midnight Society, which they did very well. But every freaking week, that dude had to cast people to be in the story. So every week he had to cast new people all the time, and they were always pretty good. And when you look at how many famous people came from that show, it's unnatural. Like, so many famous people came from Nev Campbell, Ryan Gosling. Elijah Cuthbert. Yeah. Who's the other guy that was in that movie that you were talking about with the girl next door? Like the Jay.
Ryan Gosling.
Was it Emil Hirsch? Jay Baruchel.
Jay Baruchel. He was in there.
Yeah.
Anakin Skywalker was in there.
But yeah, which I was gonna say. That was a like behind the scenes that didn't make the cut in our film. Is DJ McKell said there was one episode that we ended up not being able to make. And it was because we just couldn't get this one performer, like it just wasn't working right with respect to the context of the script. And we were like, who was it? And he was like, it was Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like, you should go back and watch Life as a House, because I'm a Hayden Christensen stan. And no, I didn't say that at all. I was just like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you can see that obviously the fact that he had to do that is crazy. And you can tell that he did a good job, because so many of those people have gone on to have like amazing career. And even the people, like every time I'm watching an episode, I'm like Googling like, whatever happened to this kid? And even the ones that didn't go on to be like Nev Campbell or Ryan Gosling, they still are working actors, Yeah. So that show to me is just so nuanced and so awesome. And the fact that they did that is the fact that they had to cast that every single week is brilliant to me. And the fact that, it's kind of a horror thing is just a bonus.
You know what blows my mind is that, and I was for sure that one of us was going to say it. Neither one of us mentioned Double Dare. And
right.
I was, and that speaks to the power of like that network we could go, you know what I'm saying? Like we could just go down a list.
Yeah.
And, realistically, it's like someone could be like, oh, really? You're not going to give a shout out to Rugrats? You're not going to talk, you know what I mean? Like there's probably 20 other ones that are just as deserving. And you know what I mean? And so it's cool because, like Steve was saying, it's like who didn't want to be in the Midnight Society? The Midnight Society is the coolest. And what's crazy is that they also knew that they were cool, because they were like, yeah, well, maybe we'll see if your story is up to snuff. Because if not, because if it's not, get your ass out of here.
some kids got turned down. Do you remember that? Sometimes kids would tell a story and they're like, "We don't know if you're ready for us yet."
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. That's kind of interesting.
But that's real, right? I mean, that's real because
That's
you're just
real.
like sometimes you try out and they're just like, hey, listen, Adam, you got a rat tail. You got to get the hell out, man. It's not cool.
Yeah. Sorry, that's not kind
Yeah.
What's next? I mean, I guess we could say what's next for this movie now that you guys have found distribution and it's coming out, but also any future projects you'd like to mention before we wrap it up?
I mean, we're working on a ton of stuff, you know. We always have different ideas in development and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll be able to announce that pretty soon.
We're both we're working on some narrative scripts right now. We actually both are working on looking at coming up with a podcast that's called Film Schmilms.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I don't know how I feel about that.
I think there's something there.
I think
there's something there.
that's in the pipeline. We're going to see how that works. So yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, and I want to say this really quickly before is that I think it's touch on is that if people take away one thing from this, I think it's hope, right? I think in 2020 and beyond, even in documentary filmmaking, there's such a ton of cynical filmmaking right now, that looks for the biggest scandal. And that's why I loved, John, you talked about Won't You Be My Neighbor. And I think that's why it resonated so much with people is because we need hope and we need honesty and, positivity at this point, right? Because the world's upside down. And so it's cool to look back. I think that's what we take from it. But yeah, I mean, we're just excited to get it out, and we hope people appreciate it and that they realize that they were such a huge part of the story in itself.
Before we go, can I give a shout out to Bill Parks? He's a producer and he's just a very handsome man. I just want to say that on record. Bill Parks, #1 handsome man.
Like if you look into his eyes too long, you might die.
Oh, wow.
So shout out to Bill Parks.
But it's worth it, right? It's worth it.
Well, of course it
Worth
is,
It's
right?
worth it to die, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
y'all. Later.
All right, take care, man.
And that was our talk with Scott and Adam.
Man, look, this is my whole childhood we're talking about. This is incredible. I don't know, man.
Yeah, no.
It couldn't be more perfect.
You couldn't tell from the interview, I'm sure, but yeah, we all really like this doc, and I think they did a really great job just kind of putting together not only this story about Nickelodeon and it kind of moving between its different iterations and kind of going through, the early years, Nick years, and what it did for animation. Like they really do a good job covering a lot of the positive aspects of what the network did for the audience it was going to, and also just kind of like what the network had going on behind the scenes. We talk a lot about that in the interview. It's just a really interesting way to frame this story, that it's just not a greatest hits of like the shows you like. There's a lot of conversation about people getting their start in Nickelodeon and, having people behind the scenes in power and making decisions that were qualified to do so, and the right people were doing it. And it's just a really entertaining documentary. And it's also just like, I think really well made. I think they did a great job kind of piecing this together in a way that is entertaining and also just, informative or enlightening. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it was really cool to learn a lot about the network that I never had known before. That just makes it even more interesting to me personally.
And as a doc, too, so many docs are about such horrible things. This doc would have really fit into our feel-good conversation of our last episode as well. This is the kind of easy, like you've said it about things before, Steve. It's just an easy watch, It's just
yeah. You fly through it, and I mean, we all. I mean, this is the go ahead for this podcast, obviously.
Yeah,
so if this interests you, what we talked about sounds interesting. If you are of the age or of the time, even if you found Nickelodeon later, or you're younger, your kid, you're showing whatever it is, like it's a really incredible documentary, and we definitely encourage anyone that's interested in checking it out. By the time this episode comes out, it's going to be coming out next Tuesday.
Yeah, comes out on the 17th.
Yeah, you can pre-order it on iTunes. I know Target, Amazon, they've got multiple retailers that are making this available. So please find it and support these filmmakers. It's just a great doc that we really enjoyed watching, and even more, having them on the podcast was an absolute blast. So
yeah, man. I could not believe how kind they were. They're just kind, easy to talk to guys. Just a fun conversation. I think we're just having good luck with guests, man. It's just with this immense chemistry between us and the guests. I think this kind of permeating off of this audio.
Let's hope we get some more.
did you say chemistry or did you mean chemistry?
Yeah.
I meant chemistry. I apologize.
That's what I thought. That's our
Chemistry.
own brand of it. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah, no, it was great. And thanks for trying to, or getting that together, John. It was a great conversation with them.
Thank
It
you
was a
so
blast.
much, man.
Hopefully we can do more. We can do more soon with more filmmakers and more returning friends of the show. I think this one thing this era of recording these things over Zoom does is it opens us up to having guests on. We there's some cool possibilities out there. So
I would love to have them, whatever they got going on next, especially like, whatever it might be, that would love to have them back, and hopefully they'll come back on the podcast. But yeah, again, it's available next Tuesday on all the digital platforms. If you prefer the video on demand, iTunes obviously is a popular one that you can pre-order it for still. I think it's only $12.99, but Target even is carrying it. You can order it, and they have physical discs too if you want those as well. But whatever your choice is, we recommend checking this documentary out. Again, it's called The Orange Years, the Nickelodeon story. And again, thank you, Adam and Scott, for coming on the podcast. It's really appreciated. You can find us at movieschmovie.com, facebook.com/movieschmovie. And wherever you subscribe to this, hopefully you do. Or even if you're listening to it on Facebook, wherever we posted this and you found us, if there's any way that you can review this podcast, rate it, share it, just maybe even send a text message to your best friend telling them about this podcast and maybe send them a link, whatever it is.
although why you're
it.
such good friends with them and they don't listen to this show, I don't know. I mean, what's going on there?
I'm assuming positive intent.
What kind of lack of judgment is that show, though? I like to think our listeners are just better people than that. But I might be wrong. I'm expecting too much.
Right. But yeah, we'll be back in a week or so with a new episode, and we'll talk to you guys then. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
All right, I'm stopping this shiz.